My dad sat us all down in the living room, looked me dead in the eye, and told me he sold Grandma's house. Just like that. No warning. No discussion. He said it was for family debts, and when I opened my mouth to ask about my inheritance, he cut me off sharp. Ava, you weren't even close to her like your sister was. This money's for all of us now, don't make a scene. My sister sat there smirking, adding her own little twist of the knife. Yeah, sis, you always dreamed too big for that rundown place anyway. It's gone, deal with it. Everyone in that room nodded along like I was invisible. But while they were busy celebrating, I felt the corner of a dusty file poking out of my bag. And I thought to myself, what if they don't know about the second deed? My name is Ava, and I'm 36 years old. For the past decade, I've worked as a librarian in a small town where everybody knows everybody, and most people forget I even exist. That's kind of been the theme of my whole life. I'm the middle child, sandwiched between an older brother who moved away years ago and a younger sister named Brooke who always had the spotlight aimed right at her face. Dad called Brooke the prized one. He said it so often it stopped sounding like a compliment and started sounding like a title she'd earned just by being loud and pretty and willing to agree with whatever he said. Me? I was the steady one. The helper. The one they called when something needed doing, but never when something needed celebrating. I didn't grow up bitter about it. Not at first. I told myself I was fine being quiet, being useful, being reliable. But when the pandemic hit and the library shut its doors, everything I'd built just crumbled. I lost my job. I burned through my savings. And the only person who seemed to notice was Grandma. Her name was Estelle, and she lived alone in this creaky old house on the edge of town. Peeling paint, sagging porch, wild garden that smelled like lavender and rain-soaked earth. Nobody in the family cared about that house. They called it a burden, an eyesore, a waste of property tax money. But I loved it. I loved her. When she got sick, I moved in to take care of her. I cooked her meals. I read to her at night. I held her hand through the worst of it when the treatment stopped working, and all we had left were stories and silence. During those final months, we talked about what the house could become. I had this dream of turning it into a community book nook, a free little library space for underprivileged kids in the area who didn't have access to books. Grandma loved that idea. She'd squeeze my hand and say, "You've got the heart for it, Ava. Don't let anyone take that from you." I wasn't rich or glamorous like my sister, always chasing the spotlight, but I had something they didn't expect. A bond with Grandma that ran deeper than money. Dad never visited her. Brooke showed up once, took a selfie by the garden, posted it online with some caption about cherishing family, and left within 20 minutes. They didn't sit with her through the long nights. They didn't change her sheets or learn the exact temperature she liked her tea. They didn't hear the things she whispered when she thought nobody else was listening. But I did. I heard all of it. And I kept my head down, but I was learning more than they realized. When Grandma passed, I thought the grief would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part was watching my family treat her death like a business opportunity. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, the one who gives everything but gets nothing back, hit that subscribe button. Let's build a space for stories like ours. I know that ache of being undervalued. Drop a comment with your own family moment, and I'll read every single one because you're not alone in this. Subscribe now, like if this hits home, and click share to spread it to someone else who's been there. Let's turn our quiet strengths into something loud together. 3 weeks after the funeral, I got a phone call that made my stomach drop. It was a woman named Diana from Crestfield Realty. She sounded cheerful, almost robotic, like she was reading from a script. "Hi, I'm just calling to confirm the final closing details on the property at 412 Elm Grove Lane. The buyer's financing went through, so we're all set." I sat there in my kitchen, holding the phone so tight my knuckles went white. "I'm sorry," I said. "What sale?" There was a pause. I could hear her typing. "The sale initiated by your father, Gerald Whitmore. He listed the property 6 days after the homeowner's passing. It closed last week." 6 days. Grandma had barely been in the ground, and Dad had already put her house on the market. I hadn't been told. I hadn't been consulted. I hadn't even been asked if I wanted a single thing from inside those walls. I called Dad that night. He didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. I texted Brooke. She left me on read. It wasn't until the next family dinner, a Sunday roast at Dad's place, that I finally got my answers. And I wish I hadn't. The table was set for 7. Dad, his new wife Linda, Brooke's husband Todd, and a couple of cousins. I showed up uninvited. The room went quiet when I walked in, the kind of silence that tells you people were just talking about you. I sat down anyway. Dad, I said, keeping my voice level. I got a call from a realtor. About Grandma's house. He didn't even look up from his plate. He cut his steak slowly, chewing like he had all the time in the world. Then he wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, "Yeah, I handled it. The house was falling apart. I used the money to keep the auto shop from going under." "You're welcome. You're welcome," I repeated. "You sold Grandma's house without telling me, and you want me to say thank you?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. "You think you know what to do with that old shack? You're just like your mom. Dreamy but impractical. The money's helping the family move forward." That stung in a way I can't fully describe. Comparing me to my mother, who left when I was 9, was his favorite weapon. He knew it cut deep, and he used it on purpose. Brooke leaned back in her chair with a mocking laugh. "Come on, Ava, you couldn't even afford the taxes. Dad did you a favor." Everyone at the table seemed to agree. Nods, quiet murmurs, the gentle clink of forks returning to plates like the conversation was already over. I tried one more time. After dinner, I pulled Dad aside near the back porch. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass. I kept my voice low. "Dad, Grandma wanted me to have that house. She told me. We talked about it." He crossed his arms and looked at me the way you look at a child who said something embarrassing. "She said a lot of things at the end, Ava. She wasn't in her right mind." I had a family agreement drawn up. Your brother signed off by email. Brooke co-signed. "It's done." "A family agreement?" I whispered. "You didn't even include me." "Because you would have made it difficult," he said flatly. Then he walked back inside. I stood there for a long time. Then I went in my car, sat in the driver's seat, and cried. Not the quiet kind. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep it feels like your ribs might crack. But as I sat there wiping my face with my sleeve, my hand brushed against the file in my bag. The one I'd been carrying around since Grandma's funeral. I pulled it out and opened it under the dim glow of the dome light. It was a copy of a deed. A second deed. Filed with the county clerk's office just 3 weeks before Grandma died. And on it, in clear legal language, was my name. Ava Renee Whitmore. Sole owner. Grandma had done it quietly. She had gone to the county clerk, filed a new deed transferring the property directly to me, and she never told a soul. Not Dad. Not Brooke. Not even me. I stared at that paper until the words blurred. And for the first time that night, I stopped crying. The weeks that followed were some of the loneliest I've ever experienced. Dad took the money from the house sale, about $140,000, and the first thing he did was pour most of it into his failing auto shop on the other side of town. New equipment, new signage, a fresh coat of paint on a business that had been hemorrhaging money for years. But that wasn't all. He also funded a vacation for Brooke and Todd. A 2-week trip to the Caribbean. Brooke posted pictures every single day. Turquoise water, white sand, cocktails with little umbrellas in them. She tagged Dad in every post with captions like, "Best father in the world" and "Family first, always." I wasn't included in any of it. No call. No text. No invitation. I was removed from the family group chat sometime during that first week, and I only found out because a cousin awkwardly mentioned a conversation I clearly hadn't been part of. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. I had the deed. I had the truth. But the isolation was heavy. I went to work every day at the library, shelving books, helping patrons, smiling the way librarians are supposed to smile. Quiet and warm and unobtrusive. And every evening, after locking up, I'd sit at the back table with a stack of property law books and teach myself things I never thought I'd need to know. Easements. Quit-claim deeds. Transfer of title. Chain of custody. I took notes in a spiral notebook, the same kind I used to use for Grandma's grocery lists. I was building something, even if nobody could see it yet. Then came the town fair. It was a small annual event, the kind with pie contests and raffle tickets and folding chairs on the grass. I went because I always went. It was one of the few places I still felt like I belonged. But Dad was there too. He was standing near the barbecue stand with a group of his buddies, laughing loudly, holding a beer like a trophy. When he saw me walk past, he didn't lower his voice. He raised it. "Yeah, I finally sold that old dump on Elm Grove. Best decision I ever made. Should have done it years ago, but you know how it is. Some people get too sentimental to understand business." He looked right at me when he said it. His friends chuckled. I kept walking, my face burning. The smell of fried dough and kettle corn mixed with the humiliation settling in my chest, and I couldn't tell which one made me feel more sick. A few days later, Brooke called me. Her voice was sweet, almost syrupy, which immediately put me on guard. "Hey, Ava. I need a tiny favor. Dad's refinancing the shop, and he needs a cosigner on some family loan paperwork. It's just a formality. Can you swing by and sign?" I should have said no. Every instinct told me to say no. But a part of me, the part that still wanted to be included, the part that still hoped they might see me as family, said yes. I drove to Dad's house. Brooke had the papers laid out on the kitchen table. She pointed to the lines, told me where to sign, and I did. I didn't read every page. I trusted her. That was my mistake. 2 days later, I found out what I'd actually signed. It wasn't a cosigner form for a refinance. It was a consent document authorizing the release of additional funds from the estate account, funds tied to Grandma's remaining assets. Brooke had tricked me into helping them access more money. When I confronted her by phone, she didn't even pretend to feel bad. Her voice dropped to a whisper, calm and sharp like a blade. "You don't need that house. You're not the star here, Ava. You never were." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. The sound of the refrigerator humming was the only noise in my apartment, and it felt like the loneliest sound in the world. I thought about giving up. I really did. The next day, I told my coworker Janet about everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she put her hand on my arm and said, "Ava, you're not crazy. And you're not weak. But you need to stop playing their game and start playing yours." She was right. Meanwhile, the family's arrogance grew. Dad threw a small dinner party, uninviting me explicitly this time. Brooke texted the cousins, "Don't bother including Ava. She's being dramatic as usual." And then the final blow came. Dad had apparently hit a minor legal snag with the sale. Something about disclosure paperwork he'd rushed through. A county office had flagged a discrepancy. Instead of dealing with it quietly, Dad went online. He posted on his personal page, tagging mutual friends and neighbors, writing, "Some people just can't let go of the past. Trying to block progress because they're stuck in their feelings." Sad. Everyone knew he was talking about me. I saw the comments. The laughing emojis. The people I'd known my whole life piling on without even hearing my side. That night, I opened my notebook. I looked at the deed. I looked at every document, every note, every piece of evidence I'd been quietly gathering for weeks. And I made a decision. I was done being the one they stepped on. It was time to step forward. What my family didn't understand, and what I never bothered to tell them, was that Grandma Estelle was not the confused, fading old woman they imagined her to be. Not even close. In those final weeks, when they assumed she was barely aware of her surroundings, she was sharper than all of them combined. I remember one night, about a month before she passed. It was late, the house was dark except for the kitchen light, and the only sound was the soft tick of the clock on the wall above the stove. She was sitting at the table in her blue robe, a cup of chamomile tea in front of her, untouched because she never drank it. She just liked holding the warmth. "Ava," she said quietly. "Come sit." I pulled up a chair. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes clear and steady. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Protect what's yours. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to hand it to you. Because they won't." I didn't fully understand at the time. I thought she was talking about life in general, about confidence, about not being so timid. But she wasn't speaking in metaphors. She was being literal. What they didn't know is that Grandma saw right through their games. She trusted me with more than memories. She'd watched Dad's spending habits for years. She knew about the debts, the shortcuts, the way he'd sweet-talked his way through one financial mess after another. She knew Brooke followed his lead. And she knew that the moment she was gone, they'd come for the house like vultures circling a field. So she made a move. Quietly, on a Tuesday afternoon, with the help of a lawyer I hadn't met yet, she drove herself to the county clerk's office. Her hands shook when she signed the papers. The clerk told me that later, when I went to verify it myself. But she signed them. A second deed, transferring full legal ownership of 412 Elm Grove Lane to Maine. She filed it. She paid the recording fee in cash. And then she went home and never mentioned it. I found out about it only because of a notice that arrived in a plain envelope 2 weeks after the funeral. It was addressed to me, care of Grandma's house. A simple county confirmation of a recorded deed transfer. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail. But something made me open it. And when I read it, I had to sit down because the room started spinning. I had a plan they never saw coming, one that could rewrite everything. But I couldn't rush it. If I showed my hand too early, Dad would find a way to muddy the waters. He'd claim the deed was filed under duress, or that Grandma wasn't competent, or some other lie that sounded just believable enough to slow things down. So I kept it secret. I carried that folder in my bag every single day like a shield I wasn't ready to raise yet. When they mocked me at dinner, I thought about it. When Brooke tricked me into signing those papers, I held on to it. When Dad posted about me online, I didn't respond. I just added another page to my notebook. They thought I was just grieving, but I was gathering the pieces they'd overlooked. And every night, I'd sit in my apartment, open the folder, and read the deed one more time. Grandma's handwriting on the margin of a sticky note, still attached to the original, for Ava. Because she earned it. That quiet gift proved my worth beyond the family's doubts. And soon, it would prove a whole lot more. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I'm a librarian, not a lawyer. I can research statutes and look up case precedents, but standing up in a legal dispute against my own father required someone with sharper teeth. That's when I thought of Mr. Hargrove. Leonard Hargrove was a semi-retired attorney in his 60s who'd handled Grandma's affairs years ago when Grandpa passed. He was a no-nonsense man, tall and lean with reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of his nose. He spoke in short, measured sentences and never said a word he didn't mean. I found his number in Grandma's old address book, a leather-bound thing with coffee stains and dog-eared pages. He picked up on the third ring. When I explained everything, the sale, the forged agreement, the second deed, there was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, "Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring everything you have." I sat across from him the next day in a small office that smelled like cedar and old paper. He went through every document, every note, every county filing. When he finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me. "Your grandma was sharper than they gave her credit for. She left you that house for a reason, Ava. Let's make sure it sticks." For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was on my side. Not just sympathizing, but actually standing with me. Mr. Hargrove knew my family's history better than I realized. He told me Dad had defaulted on loans before, that there was a pattern of financial recklessness going back over a decade. He wasn't surprised by any of it. Meanwhile, the family's arrogance reached new heights. Dad threw another party at his house, this time to celebrate the auto shop's reopening. He raised a glass in front of everyone and toasted to finally cutting dead weight. I wasn't there, but a cousin told me about it later, cringing as she relayed the words. Brooke wasn't done either. She started spreading rumors in town that I was making up stories about some fake deed, telling people I'd gone unstable after Grandma's death. A few people I thought were friends stopped returning my calls. The isolation tightened around me like a fist. But Mr. Hargrove kept me steady. "Hold steady," he told me during one of our meetings. "Their overconfidence is our edge. Let them talk. Let them celebrate. The louder they are now, the quieter they'll be later." I shared things with him I hadn't told anyone. About the book Nook Dream. About the nights I spent reading to Grandma. about how the house smelled like lavender and old wood and something I could never quite name, but always made me feel safe. He listened to all of it. And then he said, "We file next week." The family had no idea what was coming. They thought the sale was ironclad. They thought I was broken. They thought wrong. The meeting was set for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning in the conference room of Mr. Hargrove's law office. It was a small room, nothing fancy. A rectangular table, 6 chairs, fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled like stale coffee and printer toner. Mr. Hargrove had sent formal letters to Dad, Brooke, and the buyer's attorney, requesting an emergency will dispute review regarding the property at 412 Elm Grove Lane. Dad showed up in his best jacket, the one he wore to church on holidays. Brooke came in heels and a blazer, like she was arriving at a business lunch. Todd trailed behind her, looking uncomfortable. They sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other, with Mr. Hargrove beside me and the folder in front of us. Dad started before anyone else could speak. He leaned forward and pointed at me. "I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, Ava, but this is a waste of everyone's time. That house was part of the family estate, and I had every right to sell it." Mr. Hargrove didn't react. He opened the folder slowly and laid out 3 documents on the table. The first was the original deed, the one Dad had used to list the property. The second was the signed family agreement that excluded me. The third was the second deed, the one filed by Grandma at the county clerk's office, 21 days before her death, transferring sole legal ownership of the house to me. The room went very still. Dad picked up the paper and stared at it. His face went from confusion to anger in about 3 seconds. "This is nonsense," he shouted, slamming it back down. "I sold it fair and square. You can't just pull some fake paper now." Mr. Hargrove spoke calmly. "That document is a legally recorded deed, filed and stamped by the county clerk. It supersedes the prior deed. The property was transferred to Ava before your mother passed. Your sale was unauthorized." Dad's mouth opened, but nothing came out for a moment. Then he sputtered. She wasn't in her right mind. She didn't know what she was signing. The filing was witnessed by a notary and accompanied by a physician's letter confirming her mental competency at the time of signing. Mr. Hargrove replied, "I have copies of both." Brooke jumped in, leaning across the table toward me. Her voice shifted to that fake sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "Ava, come on. You're just jealous of how close Dad and I were to Grandma. Admit it and drop this. We can work something out. We're family." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had tricked me into signing papers, who had whispered that I wasn't the star, who had posted vacation photos with money taken from our grandmother's legacy. And I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not anger, exactly. Clarity. "No," I said. My voice was steady. Quiet, but firm. "I've had enough of being the one you step on. Grandma knew your games. She watched you both for years. And she chose me. This house is mine." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Mr. Hargrove continued. He explained that because the second deed was filed before the date of death and properly recorded, Dad's sale was legally fraudulent. The buyer's attorney, who had been sitting in the corner reviewing the documents, closed his briefcase and said his client would be seeking a full refund. Dad's face went pale. The legal fees alone would be devastating, and Mr. Hargrove informed him that the county had grounds to pursue charges for filing a fraudulent property transfer. Brooke turned on Dad instantly. "You told me it was all clear. You said there was nothing to worry about." Dad shot back. "How was I supposed to know she did this behind my back?" They started arguing with each other, fingers pointing, voices rising. I sat there watching them come apart at the seams. And I said the last thing I needed to say. "You sold what wasn't yours to sell. You erased me from this family like I didn't matter. But I won't let you erase what I built with her." I stood up, collected my folder, and walked out of that room. Behind me, I could still hear them shouting at each other. But for the first time, their noise didn't touch me. The legal process took a few months, but the outcome was never in doubt. The sale was reversed. The buyer got his money back, which Dad had to scramble to repay from the auto shop funds and personal savings. The shop closed again within the year. Brooke and Todd stopped getting the financial cushion they'd grown used to. The vacations dried up. The designer bags stopped appearing. Dad called me twice. The first time, he left a voicemail that started with an apology and ended with a request for money. I deleted it. The second time, Brooke called on his behalf, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Ava, Dad's in trouble. Can we talk?" I told her I wished them well. Then I hung up. Walking away wasn't defeat. It was me finally claiming the life Grandma saw in me, one where my quiet strength speaks louder than their noise. I moved back into the house on Elm Grove Lane that fall. I repainted the porch. I replanted the garden. And in the front room, where Grandma used to sit with her tea, I built shelves. Floor to ceiling, filled with books. Picture books and chapter books and young adult novels and poetry collections. I opened the doors on a Saturday morning and 12 kids from the neighborhood showed up before noon. I called it Estelle's Nook. Now at 36, I'm surrounded by people who actually see me. Neighbors who wave. Kids who come back every week. A community that grew out of something my grandmother planted and I refused to let die. I don't need their approval anymore. I never really did. I just needed to believe what Grandma already knew. That I was enough. If your family ever betrayed you over something as personal as inheritance or a loved one's legacy, that sting of being erased hits deep. I get it, because I lived it. You've probably felt that mix of grief and anger when they act like your bond didn't matter, like your sacrifices were invisible. Share your story in the comments below. Tell me how you fought back, or what you learned from walking away. I want to hear every word because your experience matters more than you think. Subscribe to connect with others who've turned family injustice into their power. Your experience could inspire someone sitting alone right now, wondering if they're crazy for feeling hurt. You're not crazy. You're awake. Click share to help this story reach others who need to know they're not alone in reclaiming what's theirs. Let's keep building this together.